Editing. Worth noting, editing, very broad category. You can do a lot of different things. Sometimes the thing that editing does well is not even visible in one single clip. It's more flow and whatnot. Bear all that in mind. These are going to be a few instances of specific editing moments that got a great response out of me. Two in the same category, sort of. The general style of Soviet montage. I'll use examples from October and By the Law. Both Soviet montage films, and the movement was well known for, conjoining two seemingly unrelated moments to provoke an emotional response out of the sequencing. And I think this is most easily seen in By the Law, where we have this deadly conflict reflected in the blazing fire in the cabin under the kettle. The film is connecting the emotive ferocity of the fire with the emotional impact of that fight. And then in a slightly different example, we can see October here, where the edit draws, a comparison to the stature or perhaps pompousness of this military leader with this peacock. Again, it seems like an unintuitive combination in a way, but you see them in conjunction, you can kind of see the film is drawing a connection between these two things to make an emotional connection in your brain. Then another pair of great moments, I think, for me, are found in I Fidanzati and After Sun. And this is kind of desynchronizing the audio and the video. Editing is also editing the sound. It determines, what you will hear combined with what you will see in a given moment. Sometimes when you get a chance to split them up, they can make something really powerful. I Fidanzati does this beautifully by anchoring scenes of memory in the present.
Niente. Poi ma te siete inversa stasera.
And it gives, this emotional context to it by giving the memory almost like a very ephemeral feeling. Like it's not the entire thing they're experiencing. They are grounded in reality and they are experiencing something in the past. They are just remembering. It's not real life, right? It's anchored in what is happening. And then After Sun is another treasured example for me, where the camera is capturing this cherished memory of a photo developing, a photo that represents this trip that the father and daughter have had together.
Me too. What?
I mean, why can't we?
What do you mean?
Can't we just stay here?
And as you see it develop, you hear the conversation going on, right? You know that the trip is ongoing, that reality continues. But by desynchronizing that sound with what we're seeing the emphasis on the memory, on the connection, on that snapshot in time that the daughter carries with her. I think it's just a beautiful moment. Then the last one is El Reno, which I kind of want to throw in to emphasize that cuts have power. Films have momentum as they progress, but a cut has the power to stop a film's momentum in its tracks, perhaps transition to something else, perhaps completely reframe what you were thinking of. So this one might be a little tough to explain, but I'm going to do my best because this is the most powerful single cut that I can think of in a film that I've watched.
No se haya parado a pensarlo. Y si lo ha hecho, si se ha parado a pensarlo, tampoco puedo concebir que se haya acostado tranquilo cada noche con la vida que ha conseguido. Así que, por favor, contésteme a esta pregunta. ¿Usted se ha parado a pensar alguna vez, algún segundo de su vida, un instante, en todo este tiempo lo que estaba haciendo?
You can see it's shot not quite at 3/4 profile, but it's a little off. And so, we're just doing a regular shot reverse shot as they're talking. The dialogue is carrying the weight as they've got this tense, heated exchange. So we get this last extended monologue from the presenter, and the main character is kind of looking back at her in a slightly worried way. We've had this string of shots kind of at this angle. And when it cuts back to this last moment, it's just pretty much dead on. And suddenly it's like she's finishing her tirade, her anger, lashing out at this guy, deservedly in the context of the film. And this time she's just looking right into your soul as she does it. And to me, just the slight change from this camera setup to this one is just huge for the movie. It's such a fantastic moment. Then we'll go composition. I think most people are used to the ideas of images being powerful. Most people have done a little bit of artistic education in school. People see photography, natural beauty, and I think composition is probably one of the more recognized forms of, artistic merit in a film. But still, we'll go over a few because I'm very visually minded. So to me, these are some of the most striking aspects of a film. The White Dove. Here we get pretty simple setup. There is a backstory for why the child is in a wheelchair. We see, this depiction of what happened in a sort of poetic way. And then we get this poetic visualization of him rolling somewhere, into the darkness, now in a wheelchair. And it does a great job of just setting up this tragedy and this uncertainty as he heads in towards the unknown in a new condition. The Lodger. This shot speaks to a man who's, surrounded by conflict on both sides. His fate is out of his control as he's suspended, by his hands in the handcuffs. I love the motion in the crowd to contrast his stillness and emphasize his helplessness. The close close-ups, I think, are worth noting in the context of emotion, I think, because, this is clearly not, like, as the camera's looking down on him, it's clearly not taking place in the same physical spot as, that wide shot was. Like, there's nothing below him. It's just blackness. It's purely emotive, and it is non-literal. And I think it's lovely that we have the contrast of, like, this very, very poetic composition out wide, and then a different type of very poetic composition for his close-up looking down on him. This is a movie packed with some great direction overall. Very much recommend it, but this moment specifically stood out to me. They probably don't have that much of a choice at this point in filmmaking history, but in order to capture the scene, I'm sure the camera had to bounce as it was on the back of the car regardless. But, first the bounce of the camera gives like this speedy driving, a certain unstable quality, which is great. And then we transition into this beautiful shot of the darkened road ahead that the headlights just can't penetrate, right? A ton of uncertainty ahead, a lot of danger, especially when combined editing with the previous shot of like the kind of bouncy, uncertain sort of camera. The uncertainty heading into darkness is a powerful image to me. And then Ran, this is, this sequence has perhaps one of the most famous movie stills of all time. I'm not going to pick that one. I'm going to choose a different one to close out on because I want to tie a few different things together and kind of emphasize how even though a specific moment may feel like it carries the weight of emotion, it's everything working together. This shot is powerful and evocative by itself, but it's the context. It's the edit showing the sequence of events, the capture of the castle. It's the score adding gravitas. It's, the performance, the way he sells just the normal position with fear and sorrow on his face. It's stunning. And it just carries the weight that it does because not just of the composition, which is powerful, but of a lot of powerful elements combined together. And then I'll just finish up with a couple of kind of random ones that I didn't have enough in mind to make a category. First one is, of course, Citizen Kane again. We weren't actually done. I lied last time. This time it's lighting. And it's an unavoidably strong aesthetic. Like, it is so much larger than life. It's fantastic. So much this film is examining Charles Foster Kane, his perception and his reality, his evolution throughout life. But, we kind of start out the film with this mystery of who is Charles Foster Kane. And that is what these faceless people are presented with. They're journalists, but this lighting is just pure mystery. It completely blocks out their faces, almost completely. And I think it just creates this feeling of uncertainty and mystery perfectly for the film. The journalists are himself a figure of mystery in that, he's kind of always the witness, kind of off to the side, faceless in most of these scenes that he's in. He's a faceless person as well, seeking out truth about Charles Foster Kane, much the same as the audience is. And then almost the exact opposite aesthetic is Greener Grass, an example of color. Greener Grass is a suburban satire, and it is set around this mother's experience in a neighborhood with a variety of, wacky hijinks happening, highlight dynamics in suburbia, all that fun stuff. Funniest movie I've ever watched, one of my favorites. But the color and saturation, I think, are unmistakable stylistic statements. On the one hand, the film is so bright and shiny. It's kind of artificially pristine like an infomercial. And it's also colorful. It's candy-coated, almost sickeningly sweet. And I think these do a great job creating this feeling of what this movie is, of artificiality, of something that's perhaps too good to be true, perhaps something that you almost don't want to be true because it's so much of that. And I think it ties in great with some of the ideas in the film of the competition, the desire to, quietly, passive-aggressively assert dominance and be the best in this weirdly unobtrusive and pleasant-looking way. I think it's fantastic support for the film.